Everyone at Clearwater Range thought she didn't belong. Just another quiet face who'd probably fire one shaky round, pack up early, and disappear without a trace. No one asked her name. No one watched her unpack. But 5 minutes later, that same woman would fire a shot so clean it would break a long-standing range record, one nobody had come close to in years. And it wouldn't come from the guy in full camo, or the one holding court near the vending machines. It came from the person they never expected, the one they didn't bother to look at twice, until she made history. What happened next was not only a lesson for the aggressors, but also a powerful reminder of empathy, responsibility, and the ongoing fight for equal dignity. We're about to share a powerful moment of truth, but first, drop your location and let us know, have you ever witnessed or experienced something like this? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. Story and the struggle to remain strong. The bell over the door gave a sharp clang as Selena Marshall stepped inside, and for a second the room took her in, then promptly dismissed her. Some folks squinted. Most barely looked up from their coffee-stained score sheets. The smell of gunpowder, old sweat, and synthetic leather hung in the air like a tradition no one questioned. Selena didn't flinch. She adjusted the strap of her duffel bag, boots tapping a calm rhythm across the linoleum floor as she made her way to the sign-in desk. Behind the counter sat Rick Gray Mustache, eyes glued to a clipboard like it held state secrets. He didn't lift his head. "Sign-ups are over there," he said, pointing with the enthusiasm of a DMV worker at 4:59 p.m. Selena nodded, even though he wasn't looking, and wrote her name in tight, practiced print. Not that anyone would notice, but she still made sure every letter was clean. Because when people already expect you to fail, you don't give them the luxury of sloppy handwriting. As she walked toward the benches, her presence barely stirred the air. No dramatic music, no spotlight, just quiet certainty, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. From the far end of the range came a low laugh. "New blood," someone said. "Better clear a lane by the door. She might not stick around." More chuckles followed, lazy and confident. Selena didn't react. She didn't need to. She laid her bag down, unzipped it slowly, and began her ritual: gloves, ear protection, rifle case. Her motions were smooth, efficient, each one practiced and free of performance. She moved like she'd been doing this since before confidence was fashionable, before every guy on Instagram started calling himself a marksman after hitting a soda can from 20 feet. Her jacket was simple, her gear clean. No military patches, no "don't tread on me" decals, just function. And while the regulars laughed and sized her up like she was a guest at their backyard barbecue, Selena stayed locked in. The truth is, the more they underestimated her, the more space they gave her. That's the thing about being ignored. It clears the air for focus. She glanced at the old corkboard near the vending machine, the range's Hall of Fame. One name stood out like a billboard: Brett Dawson. 6-year champ, local hero. His perfect score on moving targets from 2017 was still being passed around like a family recipe. His photo? Tight grin, tactical gear, flag hat, looked down on the room like he still owned it. Selena studied it for only a second. Records are made to be broken, but first you have to show up. Her mind drifted briefly to Broken Bow, Oklahoma. Summer heat, rustling grass, and the distant sound of her father's voice. Reuben Marshall never barked orders. He believed in teaching by silence and letting your hands do the talking. "Let the world get loud," he'd say. "You stay ready. Your aim knows who you are." Back at Clearwater, the buzz of pre-competition small talk filled the room like static. People unpacked gear and swapped predictions with the kind of confidence that comes from never having to prove yourself. No one saw the woman in the green jacket as a threat. No one asked what brought her there or how many years she'd spent perfecting a craft in the quiet. But they would. Because 5 minutes later, when she stepped into lane 7, All that silence she'd carried with her, it was about to speak louder than any voice in the room ever had. The guy in the trucker cap made his entrance with the subtlety of a fire alarm, leaning against lane 5 like he paid rent there. His belly pushed out against a faded red t-shirt that read, "Don't miss twice," though judging by his smirk, he hadn't hit once today. He looked Selina over the way someone might glance at a misplaced mop bucket in the hallway. "Hey, Rick," he called out, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Might want to clear a spot near the exit. This one might not stay long." A wave of low laughter followed. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even sharp. It was worse than that. It was casual, thoughtless. The kind of laughter that's only funny when everyone agrees someone doesn't belong. Rick didn't look up from his clipboard. No defense, no correction. Just the faint rustle of a paper shuffle, like mocking a guest, was as standard as checking ammo logs. Assumptions piled like sandbags before a storm, one lazy comment at a time. Selina didn't flinch. She shifted her focus to her gear, moving slow and steady, not out of hesitation, but with the calm of someone choosing not to waste energy on noise. She'd been through this rhythm before. The murmurs, the quick glances, the invisible rules. Places like this ran on codes that weren't written down, but were passed from smirk to smirk. Like a virus with a confident handshake, she unzipped her rifle case and checked the barrel, her fingers tracing the familiar steel like a sculptor brushing off dust. Somewhere near the vending machine, a man in camo leaned over to whisper something to his friend, glancing her way with a grin. Selina couldn't hear the words, but she knew the tone. She'd heard it in locker rooms, store aisles, even churches. The voice that laughs before it listens, the kind that tries to shrink people down to stereotypes before their name is even spoken. She sat down, rested her hands on her thighs, and let the room blur into background noise. Her mind drifted, not to escape, but to remember. Oklahoma, the fields behind their old house, the sound of cicadas in the trees and the creak of the wooden porch under her boots. Her father, Reuben Marshall, stood behind her in the heat, a shadow taller than hers but never overbearing. He didn't lecture, didn't scold, placed a soda can on a fence post and said, "Let the world get noisy. You stay ready." She remembered the feel of the rifle stock against her shoulder, her heart racing the first time she hit center. She'd looked back, hoping for praise. Reuben had only nodded and said, "Good. Now do it again." She did, over and over, not for trophies, not for photos, just because it felt like hers. Selina learned early that the world wouldn't give you space unless you carved it yourself, one shot at a time. Back in the range, the noise was rising again. Selina noticed a ripple near the back wall where a small crowd had started to gather. Brett Dawson stood in the middle of it, arms crossed, posture relaxed like a man who'd already proven himself and didn't need to swing the bat anymore. His eyes swept the room lazily until they landed on her. He didn't sneer. He didn't smile either. He just watched, like a man trying to figure out if a shadow had substance. Selina met his gaze, gave a slow blink, then turned her attention back to her gloves. She didn't need his curiosity, and she sure as hell didn't need his approval. But she saw it in his body language. That slight lean forward, the one you do when something unexpected enters your line of sight. He'd noticed her. She filed that away like a mental post-it note. Not for bragging, just for tracking. She let the voices fade again. Centered her breath. Her hands found their way into familiar rhythms. Finger flexes, small wrist rotations. No tremble, no sweat. The weight of the rifle across her thighs felt like a familiar song, one she didn't need to sing out loud. Around her, conversations shifted. Boots scraped against the floor, and someone dropped a magazine with a loud clatter that made half the room flinch. Selina didn't. Her breathing stayed slow, even. She wasn't rushing toward anything. She was letting it come to her. You could feel the tension now. Not the kind that yells, but the kind that simmers under the skin. The kind that says something's about to happen, and no one wants to be caught missing it. The scorekeepers at Clearwater didn't know it yet. Neither did Brett, or trucker cap guy. But the moment was tipping. The air was tightening like a drawn bowstring. And Selina? She wasn't worried about who'd been laughing 10 minutes ago. She was focused on where that bullet would land when her moment came, and how dead silent the room would be when it did. Her name echoed through the range like a dare. Selina Marshall, Lane 7. The voice over the loudspeaker wasn't loud, but it cut through the chatter like a blade. Every head turned, not in applause, not in expectation, but in that sideways curiosity people save for things they're sure will be short-lived. Selina stood up without hurry. No deep breath, no dramatic moment of steeling herself. She just rose, lifted her rifle with the same ease you'd pick up a coffee cup, and walked. Her boots moved across the concrete with soft, deliberate steps. She didn't strut, didn't shrink, just moved in that way that made you realize confidence didn't always have a volume setting. She moved like punctuation, a period in a room full of exclamation marks. Lane 7 sat near the far edge of the range, half caught in the golden spill of late afternoon light. Selina set her gear down in clean, practiced order. She adjusted the stand, tightened the bipod, checked the scope. Every motion so fluid it looked rehearsed, though it wasn't. It was just what happened when you'd done it long enough to let your body remember for you. Her gloves creaked softly as she pulled them snug, her fingers testing the trigger pressure one last time. In her mind, she heard her father's voice again, quiet but unshakable. Breathe. Break. Pull. It wasn't a command. It was a reminder, like telling someone how to come home after a long day. The ritual wasn't for the audience. It wasn't for show. It was to make sure she stayed grounded, even if the floor started to shift. Selina leaned into the stock, her cheek resting gently against the grip as she aligned her scope with the target downrange. The target swayed ever so slightly in the breeze of the vent system. Nothing major, but enough to matter. She adjusted without thinking. The rangemaster raised a hand, checking for readiness. Selina gave him a single firm thumbs up. Somewhere behind her, someone murmured something about getting popcorn. Another chuckled. But as the rangemaster's hand dropped, everything else slipped away. Her finger tightened. The shot cracked. Clean, sharp, almost elegant. Dead center. The monitor registered it before the sound even finished bouncing off the walls. No one said a word. The silence didn't feel respectful. It felt stunned. Then she chambered the next round. Second shot. Crack. Again, dead center. Still no sound. Third shot. Crack. Same hole. This time, you could feel the silence bend, like the air was struggling to keep up. Each shot was a statement. Not a scream, just a signed letter of correction addressed to everyone who'd already written her off. The whispers stopped. The chair shifting stopped. Even the vending machine quieted. Selina kept going, shot after shot, methodical, focused. Not fast, not slow. Rhythmic, intentional. It wasn't just shooting, it was erasure. Every round wiped away another assumption, another snicker, another sideways glance. She wasn't performing, she was correcting. Her way, her pace, her voice, spoken entirely through precision and recoil. By the time the last shot hit, the room had shifted. She stepped back slowly, her shoulders relaxed, her hands steady. The rangemaster approached, blinking like he'd just walked out of a fog. He stared at the grouping on the target, then looked at the monitor, then back again. Rick, still at the front desk, had stood up without realizing it. Brett Dawson uncrossed his arms. His face didn't show embarrassment, but it didn't show embarrassment either. He looked like a man watching a storm roll in and realizing too late he'd misread the clouds. Selina didn't bask. She didn't bow. She just removed her ear protection, set it neatly beside her rifle, and stood still while the room tried to reassemble its expectations. The girl they hadn't bothered to notice had just burned her name into their silence, and none of them could pretend. They didn't hear it now. She didn't just hit the target, she cut through it like truth in a room full of assumptions. Rick squinted at the monitor like the screen had betrayed him. He leaned in, lips moving silently as he counted the hits again, his eyes flicking back and forth between the monitor and the paper target downrange. The grouping was so tight it looked less like multiple shots and more like someone had taken a hole punch to the center. No spread, no strays, just precision. One of the younger guys near lane 3 leaned sideways for a better look, elbowing his friend who was still chewing on the joke he'd told 5 minutes earlier, one that suddenly didn't feel so funny. The rangemaster stood stiff as a post, blinking like he was still buffering what he'd just seen. Selena remained still, not waiting for applause, just letting the moment stretch like elastic pulled tight around the room. No one wanted to be the first to speak. Not because they didn't have words, but because anything they said now might echo back as foolishness. She moved again, quietly, slowly, reloading with the same calm she'd carried in when no one cared she was there. Each round clicked into place like punctuation. Her breathing steady, unbothered, the same rhythm her father had taught her under Oklahoma's sun and whispering trees. Let the world get loud. You stay ready. She lined up again, leaned in, and took the shot. Crack. Dead center. Again, and again. The sound was the same, but the context had changed. This wasn't about surprise anymore. This was control. She wasn't lucky. She wasn't hot-streaking. She was writing a sermon with gunpowder, 1 verse per shot, and every line said the same thing. I was never the problem. You just never looked long enough to see me clearly. The third shot of her second magazine sliced through the same hole as the others, and someone behind her muttered a low "damn" under their breath. Necessary, it's easy. Breathing. Sorrow for you. You know that, don't you? So, it's important. Your work and yours will not allow you to hate your neighbor. You will feel nothing but love. Negotiation. The crowd had shifted. A few people stood now. The guy with the trucker cap had gone quiet entirely, staring at the lane like it owed him an apology. The man who'd joked about Instagram shooters earlier was now rubbing his chin like he was reviewing a fine piece of machinery. Someone whispered, "Who is she?" But no one answered, because in that moment she wasn't anyone they could categorize. Not a rookie, not a tourist, not a fluke. She was a problem they hadn't accounted for. And now she was solving them all, one clean pull at a time. Even the air felt different. The smell of burnt powder hung like a question. Not heavy, not hostile, just curious now. The laughter had been replaced by silence, and silence by murmurs, and murmurs by a kind of hush that doesn't come from awe. It comes from recognition. Everyone in that room was starting to realize they were witnessing something they didn't have a name for. Brett Dawson wasn't standing in the back anymore. He'd moved closer, arms no longer crossed, face no longer smug. He watched without blinking, jaw tight, a twitch at the corner of his eye like a man recalibrating a story he'd already written. He didn't look embarrassed. Brett didn't do embarrassed, but he looked alert now, studying, listening in the way men do when someone walks into their world and tilts the floor. Selena didn't look back. Didn't need to. She felt the weight of his attention, just like she felt the shifting tone in the room. That silence, that recalibrating stillness, it was louder than any standing ovation, and it hit harder too because it meant people were rethinking everything they thought they knew, starting with her. Selena chambered her last round and squeezed the trigger. Dead center again. She stepped back and lowered her weapon like a musician laying down an instrument after the final note. She didn't gloat, didn't break into a smile. She just took a slow breath and let the air do the talking. Brett kept watching, and for the first time in years, he didn't have something to say. Around them, the whole range had gone from ridicule to silence to something closer to respect. But Selina wasn't waiting for any of it. The justice had already been served, one shot at a time, and the echo of it wasn't going away anytime soon. She never asked for respect. She just took her space and let her work speak. Selina stepped back from lane 7, unclipped her gloves, and laid them gently across the bench like they'd done something holy. The rangemaster stood near the monitor, eyebrows twitching in disbelief as he stared at the numbers blinking on the screen. He muttered something under his breath, then again, louder this time. New record. And with that, the room exhaled. Not a cheer, not a round of applause, just the collective breath of people who realized they'd just witnessed something they didn't have a box for, the kind of breath that follows truth. Quiet, heavy, undeniable. Turns out, silence carries farther than applause. The sound of boots broke through the hush, slower than before, more intentional. Brett Dawson stepped forward, his usual swagger replaced with a little caution, like he was crossing unfamiliar ground. He stopped a few feet from Selina, hands at his sides, then gave a nod. Not stiff, not forced, just real. "You ever shoot competitively?" he asked, the words feeling like they weighed more than they should. Selina turned her head, not sharply, just enough to look him in the eye. "Here and there," she said simply. No brag, no list of credentials, just the facts, trimmed lean. Brett scratched his jaw, gave a slow, almost reluctant smile, and nodded again. "Well, that was solid work." She gave him a small, unreadable smile in return, something between acknowledgement and dismissal. He didn't press. Around the room, the script started rewriting itself. "I knew she had good form," someone muttered near the vending machine. Another chimed in, "Did you see how she handled that scope? Pro level." None of them had said that earlier, of course. But now that the scoreboard had spoken, the room was busy revising its memory. Selina heard it all, but didn't respond. She'd heard that kind of adjustment before. How the same mouths that dismissed you love to rewrite your origin once you win. And it was a pattern as old as pride. People didn't want to be wrong, so instead they acted like they knew it all along. Selina didn't mind. Let them spin it however they needed to. She knew the truth. And more importantly, she knew who she was before any of them started paying attention. Rick came down from the front, clipboard still in hand, but posture noticeably different, less slouch, more straight-backed. He stopped near her, glanced at the rangemaster, then back at the scoreboard. "We'd like to put your picture up," he said, gesturing toward the Hall of Fame board. "Top score's been sitting there for years. It's about time someone shook things up." His tone wasn't mocking anymore. It was earnest, maybe even a little hopeful. Selina looked at the corkboard, then back at Rick. Her smile was small, but full of clarity. "No thanks," she said. "I'm good." For a second, Rick didn't respond, caught off guard as if he hadn't considered she might not want the honor. Then he nodded, almost respectfully, and stepped back. The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The mood had shifted completely. No fanfare, no parade, just the weight of realization sitting thick in the air. Selina packed her gear the same way she unpacked it. Methodical, focused, quiet. The same quiet she walked in with, only now that silence had a different shape. It didn't signal doubt. It didn't invite mockery. It held presence, the kind that doesn't ask to be noticed because it already left a mark. Selina zipped up her case, slung her bag over her shoulder, and walked toward the door. Not faster, not slower, just her pace. And this time, no one looked away. She didn't break the record for them. She broke it to remind herself she never needed their approval. The late afternoon sun spilled across the hood of Selina's car as she pulled out of the lot, the weight of the day settling into her chest like the slow fade of adrenaline after a long sprint. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A message from her dad. Just 2 words. "How'd it go?" She smiled, real and quiet, and thumbed back her reply without hesitation. Better than fine. She didn't need to elaborate. He'd understand. She drove with the windows down, the air warm and easy, the breeze tugging gently at the collar of her jacket. Each stop sign passed like a small breath out, each stretch of road a space to let her thoughts catch up. There was no parade, no champagne, no newspaper waiting to immortalize her name. But she felt full, whole, like the kind of victory you don't have to explain to anyone to know it counted. This wasn't about the score. It never had been. The number blinking on the monitor wasn't a crown. It was a mirror. A reminder that she showed up when she didn't have to, that she stood where others might have walked away. Selena didn't fire those shots for records or handshakes or photos on a wall. She fired them to keep a promise she'd made to herself long ago, that she would never again shrink to fit someone else's expectation. Every round she pulled today was a refusal to ask for space, a refusal to play small, and maybe, just maybe, a path cleared for someone else. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is take up space without apologizing. Some stories aren't told out loud. They're carved into silence, like initials in oak. You don't see them unless you look close. But they're there, permanent, quiet, unmistakable. Selena took the long road home, past fields of wild grass and old farms with paint peeling off their porches, places that looked a lot like Broken Bow. She thought of the girls growing up in towns like hers. Sharp girls, quiet girls, the kind who don't always know they're allowed to take up space until they see someone else do it first. She thought of how many had walked into rooms where they were laughed at before they even opened their mouths, and how many had walked back out without firing a shot. Maybe now, because of what happened today, one of those doors stays open a little longer. Maybe the next time a girl shows up with a duffel bag and a quiet presence, they'll wait to see what she can do before writing her off. Or maybe they won't. But at least now, the possibility exists. That's what legacy really is. Not applause, not plaques, not records. It's the ripple that changes the current just enough for someone else to swim farther than they thought they could. By the time she turned onto her street, the sun was beginning to melt into the horizon, casting everything in that golden light that makes the world look softer than it is. Her house came into view, porch light already flickering on, and her old dog Moose thumped his tail against the screen door like he'd been counting the minutes. She parked, stepped out, and took a moment to just stand there. The silence here was different, not heavy, not expectant, just honest. She breathed it in like oxygen. No one was clapping. No one was watching. And yet the truth of what she'd done was more solid now than it had been in that entire room of witnesses. She didn't need their permission to exist, to excel, to rewrite what they thought was possible. All she ever needed was to hit her mark, and today she had. So if you're listening to this right now and you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or weighed before you even spoke, remember this: you don't need permission to be who you are. Not from strangers, not from gatekeepers, not from people who only learn to clap once the scoreboard tells them to. What you need is precision. What you need is clarity. What you need is one steady breath and one clean shot that says, without apology, "I'm here, and I've always been ready." Selena Marshall didn't come to Clearwater Range to prove a point, but she left with a room full of people who'd never forget her name. And that, in the end, is the kind of power that echoes long after the smoke clears. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.